Mayor's been busy, huh?
Yeah, we wrapped up the year by setting the levy. Last time I was here, I said whatever number we pick, Schultz, he'll say it's wrong, so that's okay. But it ended up at 4%.
Which was 4 higher than I wanted.
Exactly.
Maybe 5.
Probably 5, I was going to say. But the upside to that was the preliminary levy had been set at 6. So for 2 years in a row now, we've been able to come in with the final levy being lower than the preliminary levy, which I think is important. And, I've had a lot of financial conversations with people over this last year. No doubt the derecho storm has impacted everybody's pocketbooks, including myself and everyone else in the city, etc. So money's always tight, but this year it was even tighter. So just trying to be respectful of where people's budgets were. But at the same time, on the other side of the fence, you've got, a cumulative 20% inflation over the last 4 to 5 years. We all see it. We all know it when we go to the grocery store or any number of places. And so it's hard to manage your budget when your costs are increasing to that extent over a very short period of time. Everything that we do to keep the city functioning, from labor to tires on the squad cars, gas in the gas tanks, new fire hoses, all of those things, when they go up 20%, it just makes it that much difficult. So it's always a tough walk, but I feel pleased with what we've done. I'm not thrilled with what we've done because I'd like it to be 0 too. But I think it could have been a lot worse. And I always look at comparisons. How did we do relative to the county, which was over 9% in their case? How have we done relative to other cities that are our size around us? We're one of the lowest levies that you're going to find out there this year. So from that perspective, when I say I'm pleased, that's what I mean. But I also know that 0 would have been a better number for everyone.
How is it possible that the city does not have a budget committee?
Oh, yeah. So and I think if you've been paying attention, you've probably heard me speak on this for a number of years, that I've been in favor of a budget committee and a 0-based budget since the day I got elected. And so finally this year seemed to gain some traction amongst the council. And on Monday when we met, we agreed as a council unanimously to move forward with forming a budget committee. So I'm excited about that, because often the budget comes to us so late in the process that it's challenging to look at each department and try to make meaningful change, because you're getting it in September or October. And I think there's a value to being involved at the early stages of it as it's being built, because you ultimately sometimes have to look at offset. Some department may get something and it has to come from another department. And so who's making those decisions? Well, to this point, it's been the city manager and the finance director, and then brought to council. So my hope was to get involved in those conversations earlier to better understand that offset and help be part of the decision making earlier before it gets to the council. And when I say us, I mean, representatives of the council. But you're correct. You started by asking, how is it possible? I don't know. Because I think this is long overdue and should have existed a long time ago. And in other cities and other places, it has.
Ballpark, how many other cities our size, our demographics, our regional hub, how many have one?
Oh, boy, I don't know that answer.
More than half?
I would say half is probably a good guesstimate. But I would say that part of it is the charters, too. What responsibilities and duties do the councils have in each one of those cities, and how much power is given to the city administrator or city manager? So that impacts things as well. But ultimately, every council holds the purse strings because they have to approve the budget. So from my point of view, if as a council we're making comments about budgets, departments, spending at the end of the year or at the beginning of the year, what's the difference? We're still making comments. So better that we do it earlier and better understand every dynamic. And, right now we obviously know we're living at a time when there's been significant fraud, very concerning fraud at the state level. We all know it. I think voters and citizens want to see greater transparency in government spending. I think they wanted that all along, but now with the things that have happened at our state level, it's become even more pronounced. So I think having a budget committee allows those discussions to happen earlier, for it to be more transparent, for people to attend these things if they want to attend and see what's going on, and really be able to demonstrate to citizens, hey, we are being efficient, and here's what we're doing. And if we're not being efficient in an area, let's get efficient. So I think there are a couple different ways this can really benefit. But yeah, bottom line, I am surprised that we haven't had one, because I think it was long overdue.
Speaking of, how is this possible? How's it possible that you just missed a handful of properties in Northern Township in previous annexations?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. What Schultze is referring to is we had a item come before council on Monday to finish annexing some properties that didn't have real estate on them or anything like that. I think some of them were actually government owned, but they'd been missed. And so when we were doing cleanup as part of this whole discussion with Northern Township, that came to light. And Northern Township is agreeable because they had agreed in past annexation agreements to have this property become city property, but it just never got cleaned up. So that got caught, got flagged, and now it's done. I mean, as far as the council goes, we voted to finish it. And I don't think there's going to be any issue with Northern Township from what I understand. But yeah, it is a little bit concerning to realize that there were, significant number of tracts of land, albeit without, buildings on them, that were missed. Yeah. I wish I could tell you how.
I'm not going to lie, as just a casual observer here, I'm like, with the current legal issues, the optics of that don't look real good.
Well, yeah, I can't speak to that very well, and some of this stuff, when it happens, all I can do for my elected role is to make it right and fix it. I don't have that way back machine to go back and handle it when it happened, and so that's what makes it challenging. And that's it's a bit of a segue for me, but I tend to be focused on solutions, because if all you do is point out a problem, like, that doesn't take a whole lot. Like, we all know what certain problems are. The tough part is, how do you fix it? And whether that's cleaning up, some property that should have been annexed, or whether that is setting a budget committee, or whatever the thing might be, you got to find solutions. And then the optics are going to be what they're going to be. All you can do is be honest and go out there and talk to people and tell them what you know to be true. And when you don't know, you're better off to say, I don't know, than to make something up. Sure. And, when you ask me how were they missed, I don't know. I don't know.
Two surveyors were surveying the forest. They lost a whole 40. Didn't even survey 40 acres. Turned out to be an okay thing.
Well, it certainly
that was their only job that day.
As I say, it became part of our lore, didn't it? So, yeah, and I think you guys are probably aware that there was a letter that was being circulated by some mayors in our state regarding the fraud at the state level and calling for greater efficiency in state government. And, there's about 850 cities in the state of Minnesota. I think at last count, about 250 mayors signed off on that letter. I was not one of them. And it goes back to what I said earlier. I am a solutions-driven, pragmatic person. That's what I try to be. So for me to call out fraud or those kinds of things, that's obvious to me. What elected person or citizen, for that matter, do you know that thinks fraud is good? Mm-hmm. No one. Nobody thinks that. And what elected official do you know who says, let's be wasteful with taxpayers' money? I haven't met them. But if you're going to advance that, what's the solution? If you're going to tell the state, be more efficient, where, how, why? Because if you're not going to offer that, you leave it very open-ended and subjective. So maybe state legislators might look at that and say, we can be more efficient. We can reduce the disaster fund. Well, what would that mean for Bemidji?
Not so good.
Not so good. Or maybe they're going to say, that LGA, that only helps rural cities. What does it do in the metro? Maybe that's a place to be more efficient. What would that mean for Bemidji?
Not so good.
So if you're going to challenge someone to be more efficient, wouldn't it behoove you to tell them how? Yeah. So, why didn't I sign on the letter? Because it didn't offer a lot of solutions. That's why. And again, am I against fraud? Absolutely. Am I for more accountability and more efficient spending at the state, federal, and local level? Absolutely. But I don't get to control the federal. I don't get to control the state, but I do have significant impact on local. And so to the budget committee, where I can impact our spending in our city, I'm going to work my butt off to do the best I can to make that as efficient as possible, because that's what I was elected to do, and that's where I have influence.
Where does the city have checks and balances to ensure that
Yeah, because I think
fraud doesn't happen?
that's I think
That's the most alarming thing to me on the state level is how did this go for so long?
Well, as Minnesotans, we do pay a lot of taxes, and I think we've gotten used to it, and so we got complacent. And now when you find out that there wasn't a plan for you using some of my hard-earned tax dollars that I put in, and I'll just say I thought there was a lot of oversight. It's the state, it's the government. I just assumed there was, and I think people are upset with themselves because they assumed that too. And now we got to make sure that's got a solution to it.
Well, you know what they say about assumptions, right? So at the city level, what happens? Well, first off, as things are flowing through the finance department, there isn't one person handling everything. That's called internal control, so that there's double checks. When every check is cut, it gets put on a check register, and every 2 weeks, that check register goes to the entire city council. Sometimes that check register will have, on a slow month, 200-300 checks on it. On a busy, and I shouldn't say month because it's every 2 weeks, on a busy 2-week cycle, could be 1,000 checks.
Wow.
And it's given to us, and we approve it at the council. So I personally look at every check that is written out of the city, and anytime I have questions, I ask them. Pretty much every 2 weeks, I send to our finance director a list of questions that may be 5 or 10 long. Now, after 5 years, I know almost all of our vendors in the city. I know what they provide. Could be alcohol to the liquor store for cost of goods that they provide. Could be salt to public works that they provide. Could be equipment for the police department or fire department. So when I look at that bill list after 5 years, I can recognize about 90% of the vendors and what they do. But there's always new ones.
Sure.
And so when I see something, I call it out, and as do other council members. And so I don't ever want to approve a bill list if there's something on it that I don't understand what it's for or I have a concern. Now, some of these checks could be for $2 million. Some of these checks could be for $5. Now, does the amount of the check matter when I look at it? To an extent. But here's the thing. If you're going to commit fraud, you're probably not going to do it with a $2 million check. You know what you're going to do? You're probably going to do it with $100 1,000 times. Right? So we are the ultimate back check, and then every year our financials are audited by an independent third party that goes in and checks all this stuff and then tells us whether or not we are where we need to be financially. Have we done everything the proper way? Is everything accounted for the correct way? Those kinds of things. They issue a report that then has to also be approved by council that comes to us as well. So I would argue as a council, we have at least 3 opportunities to double check things in addition to the internal protocol. So am I overly worried that there's anything untoward happening in the city right now? No, I'm not. But it takes diligence, and I don't ever take it for granted. And I think having a budget committee will help you because you will do an additional deep dive into every one of these line item expenses in every department, which I think is good. So, yeah, that's you wanted to know how it works. That's kind of how it works.
It's all boring stuff that absolutely has to be done.
Yeah, right.
Well, for better or worse, I was trained in this because, as you all know, I'm a finance professional in my private life, and I love numbers. So this kind of stuff is like second nature or breathing to me because after 30 years in the profession, it's just what I do. But at the council level, you have many different skill sets, many different perspectives, and just because you've been trained in finance doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to catch something. Sometimes it could just be something that triggers somebody to ask a question. Sure. And so that's the thing. But the enemy of all of this stuff is the routine. It's the same thing all the time over and over and over again, no questions. That's what you have to be careful of. And, it's definitely something that we need to stay on top of, and I think we have to this point. But, don't ever get complacent and think you got it all figured out.
Do you have any good news for us?
I gave you some good news, I thought, at the beginning of this with the...
Could have been 6.
Yeah, it could have always been higher, but I think that was a piece of good news. I think that as we head into spring, I think there's going to be some tremendous opportunities to start replanting and doing more storm recovery. One of the things we approved was a tree giveaway that I think they're going to be doing in May at the Sanford Center to help with replanting. So that came through. The budget committee I think is a piece of good news as we move forward. The YMCA project continues to move forward. So yeah, there's good things going on in the city. Some new businesses coming to town and the hotel and potentially some mixed use. It sounds like Red Pine's going to get rebuilt. That'll be coming before the planning board here, I think, next Monday. So, there are positive things happening. There always is. But it's like everything else. There's always a blend of things that you'd like to see better along with things that are going well. So
Positive things don't get clicks.
No.
Negative things do.
Mm-hmm.
This is true. And, the truth is we've had, as a state, as the U.S., some pretty significant things happening. I mean, the news has been full the last few days, has it not?
Right.
And those things impact every last one of us, and ultimately they roll down to city government, many of those things. So, that's just how it is, and you have to work through it. And I'm going to go back and say that's why relationships are so important. I've had a very good relationship with Governor Walz's office. I've had a very good relationship with Pete Stauber's office, with Senator Klobuchar's office, with Matt Bliss, with Vidal Duran. I could go on, and I can pick up the phone and talk to any of these folks or their staff anytime I want. So when things come up from Bemidji's perspective that are concerning, I'm able to do that. And so, do you think any of these folks are confused about where I stand on fraud? No. Do you think they're confused about where I stand on spending? No. Why? Because I've told them to their face multiple times about these things, So I think that's what you want in local government, are people who will build relationships with other elected folks so that we can work together to try to get the job done for the citizens that have elected us. And are we all going to get elected and be of the same mind on everything? Of course not. There's going to be things we disagree on, but it's how do we work through those disagreements to get to a positive outcome for people that matters. And, here locally, I feel like I have great connections with the county board, with the school board, with our local representatives, and we're just going to keep working. That's all we can do.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. At least it was 4, Schulte. Right?
Well, I knew you were going to beat me up no matter what the number was. So, get your 25 inches of snow, make some snowballs. Just don't put any ice in them, and throw them my way.
Just verbal sparring there. I'm not attacking, I don't think.
No, you're not.
No, there's citizens out there thinking the same thing you were.
Well, and it's cumulative. I mean, that's the thing. I can say to you, well, we were at 4%, but the county was at 9%. So add those two together. What was the school? What was the airport? What was it? All of this stuff starts adding up, and you look at your tax bill. So, I can say, well, I'm happy with our piece of it, but I also recognize what the overall is. And, you see me here, drinking some coffee, and too often you hear leaders talk about, well, it's just a cup of coffee. No. There's a lot of people who don't have the luxury of having a cup of coffee. They bring it in a thermos. Some people don't get coffee at all. Right. So when you start talking about raising something $5, $10, $20, don't be arrogant and assume that doesn't have a real impact on people. It does. And when you keep raising it a cup of coffee every year, what's the cumulative effect? So, that's the thing. I can only work on the piece that I've been elected to work on, but the rest of it's not lost on me. And that's before we get to state and federal taxes, because it's all cumulative.
So what's the new next time we talk about the dispensary? Is that the new kind of...
Yeah, the thing about that is, I've been asked a lot about that. I said I have to be careful because it hasn't actually come to the planning board yet. And we are a quasi-judicial body, so... I don't have all the facts on this request yet, nor will I till it comes to us after it's exited the Planning Commission, because that's the process. So, I go on social media and I read the city's stopping this. I'm like, the city hasn't even gotten the case yet, right? It's just going through the Planning Commission, which are citizens. That's the proper process. So, it'll come to the board after the commission deals with it, which I think will probably come to the board in February. Then the board will make a call, and then we'll know what's going to happen. But for me to, just start opining on it without having all the facts in front of me is kind of hard to do. But what I will say is, welcome to cannabis in the state of Minnesota. And, this was passed a couple of years ago, and it's taken this long to work its way down to now it's about to hit Bemidji in a real tangible way. So, how decisions are made, where they're made, when they're made, all matter, because eventually it will show up at your doorstep and you will have to make a decision.
And it seems like, just in my little knowledge, and it's very little, but it seems like the rules and the are changing.
Well, it's a constant moving target.
Right. So.
Well, because it's new. I mean, I think we're on our third director of the Office of Cannabis Management. That doesn't help when you're constantly changing the leadership at the top.
The first one didn't make it a week. Does that one even count?
I don't know. But I'm going to say that when you have instability at the top, you're going to have issues.
Sure.
And additionally, it's all new legislation. So they write the bill, and then as a city, we ask, well, when you use that word, what does that actually mean? Oh, we better define that a little more. When we're measuring something, where are we measuring it from? The building, the property line. These are the kinds of nuances. Right. And after you've been at something for 20 years, all that's been worked out. But when it's brand new, these are the questions that come up. And as they come up, legislation starts to change. And then it makes it a shifting, moving target. And nobody feels good about that. Right. So whatever, the personal opinions are about cannabis, the bottom line is it's been approved. The recreational use of it in the state of Minnesota, dispensaries are going to exist. As a city, you're required to allow a certain number of them. And really all you can do is create buffer zones to try to keep, children at a safe distance and those kinds of things. And then they're going to exist. And those calls were made far above me. So at this point, my job is just to do the best job I can to make it fit for Bemidji. That's the job. And, if the day comes that I think I should have greater input in that, then I should be in a different office, right? Or at least try to run for a different office. Not, by the way, I'm not saying I'm doing that. But I mean, these decisions get made by the folks that are elected, and then at the local level, we have to work with it.
With no say.
Yeah. Well, if you want to talk about things I really stress to the governor's office and to state legislators, it's give us local control. The people in our city and county know what works for them. Give them the authority to make the decisions to allow it to fit their community, whatever it is. Give us as much control as possible, because when you do it at the state, you're assuming it's one size fits all, and that the rule that exists in Minneapolis, St. Paul, should also exist in Bemidji, Bagley, and Black Duck. And from my point of view, that's just silly.
No comment there.
Well, Mayor, seems like you're busy every month.
Yeah, everybody is. This is the world we live in. Interconnected world, phones on you all the time, children doing 20 different things. I don't ever assume I'm any busier than anyone else, because I meet a lot of working parents out there that are juggling jobs, children, derecho storm damage, and the like. So I think we all are busy just living in a super connected world, whether we like it or not. Every now and then I miss the old flip phone.
Right?
The bag phone. And the coverage that came, because there were a lot of dead spots when you had a bag phone. And half the listeners out there are like, bag phone, what is that?
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Well, thanks for stopping by.
Absolutely. Thanks for giving me some time.